Hey guys, welcome to another episode of BBQ Talk. On this episode, we're going to be discussing what type of smoker you should buy if you don't have an offset. So obviously I'm biased in saying that, my favorite type of smoker is an offset. I mean, that's just what I believe and what I like. And I'm also biased in saying it's because that's the one thing that I've been cooking on forever. But I'll say there are definitely levels to what type of offset smokers are offered, and I've kind of went through all of them. For example, like the very first time I cooked a brisket, I was using my, I think my 18.5-inch, Weber kettle grill, and doing that thing where you're pushing all the coals and wood chips on one side and the briskets on the other, and I ended up burning the whole thing, whatever. But I went from that going to a Brinkman, one of those generic brands that you can buy from Home Depot, and that thing sucked. I was having such a hard time with that smoker because there's nothing on there that's welded. You're literally putting a screw in there to attach the firebox to the cooking chamber, so I was always scared that the firebox was just gonna fall off. The handles were always loose. The thermometer on the smoker that I had, it didn't even have temperatures. It just said cold, ideal, and hot. And so I would always say that the right cooking temperature that I would have to deal with is between the E and the A of the ideal. It wasn't really anything that I learned a lot in using that smoker for over 7 years or so, but it wasn't like, that's not a way that all of us should be learning how to cook, because it was so frustrating. Also, the metal was really thin on the smoker, so I would, during the winter time, I bought a water cooler blanket to wrap around my smoker, and then bought fleece blankets to throw on top of it just to see if I can hold in some heat, and it was a mess. So in today's video, what I want to talk about is, if you're not ready to invest into a offset, that a lot of these people in Texas or all around the country, actually, people are building these really well-built offsets. What type of smoker should you buy instead? And so I'm going to be talking about kind of like my least favorite to what I think would be kind of the best option for you to learn how to manage your fires, and also be able to you're really being able to hone in on how to actually get this barbecue thing working for you, so that when you jump to an offset later on the road, obviously there'll be some learning curves in terms of like managing fire, but in terms of like what you're looking for, what you're feeling for, and all that kind of stuff should be fairly similar. So my least favorite type of smokers are going to be kind of like your gas and electric tall cabinet smokers. Like those things, I've never really cooked on one, but they just they don't seem to really do anything. And I've heard from a lot of people who have those things that, one, it doesn't really hold temperature, especially in cold weather. It just sucks out all that hot air out of there if there is a little bit of wind that blows. And also, it's just like, you're not really doing too much if you're not able to get enough heat in there. And so, if you're doing something that's simple, like if you're just trying to do some beef jerky or smoke some fish or smoke some cheese, then something like that's fine. You can kind of just replicate that. But I also think you can do the same thing with like a foil pan and just like burning little wood chips and just covering it in foil or saran wrap and just letting it smoke like that. Like, to me, that's the same thing. So in terms of trying to replicate barbecue, that's probably not the option that I would go. Probably not, even for me, not something I would even consider buying. The next option above that, I think, is something that people ask me a lot about, and it's pellet smokers. I don't really think that pellet smokers are really barbecuing, because it's similar to the electric and gas, because you're just kind of presetting it and just it's letting it do its thing. The nice thing about the pellet smoker, though, it's going to be better than those other options in terms of regulating temp, because it is going to do a better job of making sure that temp stays steady. And the other thing that I do like is that you're still kind of practicing the same sort of techniques and stuff like that that you would in an offset, but In this sense, you're able to practice more things like flavor profiles if you're testing out rubs and sauces and things like that. Like if you're really trying to replicate getting ready to get an offset in the future, it's not really the best option, just because you're not regulating temps. It's doing it for you. And you know, I also think it just kind of sucks the fun out of it. I'd be lying if I said that I would never use one. If I had a pellet smoker in my backyard, I'd probably be firing that thing up, you know, 2 or 3 times a week, just because I want to try something new. So I think it is an option for those people who do a lot of stuff, or maybe you just like barbecuing and you don't want the mess of having to work with fires and stuff like that, and you just like cooking barbecue, then yeah, go ahead and do it. I think it's a fine option. But again, in terms of like learning how to manage a fire, it's not the thing. So above that, so these are my kind of like my top 2 favorite options of things to that you can buy. One is going to be the Weber Smoky Mountain, and the second one is going to be a ceramic cooker, kind of like a Big Green Egg. Something happened between 2010 and 2013 or something where a lot of people were buying these Weber Smoky Mountains, and I've never had one, but I've had a lot of friends who've had it, and I had an opportunity to cook on a couple of them. Honestly, I think brisket, I think it does an okay job. I mean, it does better than you know, doing it on just a Weber kettle grill. But you know, I think the one thing that it cooks really well is ribs. That's the one thing that always surprises me about that Weber Smoky Mountain, is that the ribs always get some really good color on it. Because the heat is directly underneath it, it always gets a really good texture on it as well. If you guys are, again, it's not the same thing as managing like a live fire inside of a firebox, but you do need to be mindful about what temp is like you are actually reading and what's actually happening with the meat. So you have to be a little more conscious of what's going on as a whole. The Smoky Mountain, and there's 2 sizes. There's that, I think there's the 18.5 and the 22. I've cooked on both of them, and it seemed like the 18.5, although yeah, you get a smaller cooking space, it seemed to cook a lot better, and it seemed to retain the heat inside of there a lot more efficiently. So you weren't having to go back in there and having to like refeed the fire or throw more wood chunks in there really often. I remember the 22, especially when it was a little bit cold out and it was windy, it did seem to kind of like pull all that heat out, and it became more of a chore to like manage that fire. Second option, like I talked about, the ceramics. I think I personally haven't cooked on them, but I've seen food that comes off on it, and it looks really good. There are a lot of different plates and stuff like that that I know that you can cook like pizzas, or you can just grill on there, and it looks really cool. I've never cooked on one. I've always wanted to, but they're always a little bit too expensive for me. And like I said, with those things, the nice thing that you have to do is, even though there is a thermometer on top of you know, the domes on the ceramics and the Weber Smoky Mountains, you know, it might read 275, but on the dome it's way different than it is on you know, on like where it's meat level. So the one thing that I remember doing and being mindful of is that I was like, okay, I know that temp isn't exactly right, and so I really had to go back in there and really understand what type of smoke and heat is being created inside the smoker to determine maybe that 275 that reads on the dome is either, you know, too hot or not hot enough. Just like any smoker, like even those Weber Smokies that I cooked on, you know, all of them were slightly different too. So I wouldn't really always, you know, go off by that temp, but you really have to learn what is happening inside to really determine how to read that thermometer on top. And just like any offset, it's the same thing, right? You're having to read those temps, watch the fire, and do all these things to understand, you know, is my cook, is the temp, is everything that I'm reading actually doing what I want it to do? So we're gonna end this video here. Hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. If you guys have any other questions, again, just feel free to leave them in the comments down below. Make sure you like, subscribe, share this with your friends, and I will see you guys in the next video. And you just want something to learn how to cook in your backyard, you know, what type of smoke said smoker.